It's a tragic and infuriating story, and I think it's about human nature and the way in which organizations back covering, can we call it that, and reputation covering, and the unwillingness of structural organizations, institutions, like in this case, as it seems, the post office, the unwillingness of them institutionally in their arrogance and their fear of accepting what everybody already knows. And to really go into that, I think you need to understand the history. This was 1999 when this software, this post office Fujitsu Horizon software was instituted, and almost immediately problems for Subpostmasters occurred. This was software which enabled them, without paperwork, Trisha, to carry out their business and the accounts to be done automatically, but it didn't create a paperwork record. So if there was a problem, and the onus would be on them to make good as self-employed people any shortfalls. And if there was a problem from any shortfall, they wouldn't have a paper backup to be able to prove they hadn't done anything wrong. But rather than investigate those problems when they arose in the early 2000s, right at the beginning of the institution of this, or the bringing in of this software, Trisha, the post office blamed branch operators. As early as 2003, Trisha, they were getting them to sign gag orders using the law, but really the law as a mechanism for something that was utterly inappropriate, protecting reputation at the expense of truth. Now, there is an excellent article from the pioneering journalists at Computer Weekly that explains all of this for people who want to know more. But let me say this, that there was an immediate massive increase in these shortfalls, and it continued, Trisha, for 15 years. But in 2009, that magazine, Computer Weekly, which is a kind of general IT industry publication that if you're into this stuff, you read, and the post office people and the Fujitsu people must have known about it, was in the public domain and in their industry or in their consideration. Although right now you'd find it very difficult to find anyone at the post office who says they knew. They all seem to be passing the buck one way or the other, either side to side or upwards, from what I can see in the televised inquiry proceedings that are going on at the moment. Anyway, from 2009, there is no way that the post office or Fujitsu would be able to claim ignorance about these problems.
But Joseph, what I was going to say is that some of the mechanisms used, they ensured the postmasters didn't receive legal advice when they had to. They wrote the forms are like so difficult to get through, these forms and there was intimidating of postmasters into silence. They minimized arguments when it came to getting money back or claiming back. And here's the thing, these gag orders, can companies make people sign gag orders, and how enforceable are they?
You can't make someone sign a gag order unless you're offering something in exchange. And what they were doing is they were offering settlements as early as 2003 in exchange for a gagging order as to the terms and the findings of the technical reports that showed the Horizon problems. At 2003, when they were doing that in at least one case with forensic experts knowing what was going on, at that point, prosecutions should have stopped immediately on the basis of anything to do with Horizon. But it carried on. Let me ask you as a lawyer, how could the law be used like that? Wouldn't lawyers bring up that information, that same information that's in the public domain that was in the computing magazine? Surely lawyers would have that. And this is what I don't understand. It's interesting. I think you're right that people appear. There's a narrative, although we're still waiting for outcome of public inquiry. There's a criminal investigation, and so once we get close to the nitty gritty of who said what at different times to do with things that might be criminal, as however little sympathy I have for anyone who might or might be responsible, we have to be slightly careful. But we can say this, that there are reports of people who say, I was interviewed in my bedroom, I was interviewed in my spare room, that was used as evidence against me. I wasn't given easy access to a solicitor. I was abused. I was sworn at. Those questions have been put in the public inquiry. People were hounded There's a narrative that people were hounded into submission by a very aggressive policy, which was not accountable externally. There doesn't appear to have been adequate ministerial oversight. Certainly, the Crown Prosecution Service had no official role in dealing with what appears to be a renegade prosecutor misusing, or at least dealing with its prosecutions, and where it had concrete objective doubt, and really being on notice of these problems, continuing to deny their existence. And
so Joseph,
2000, yes.
So Joseph, here's all right. So, and tell me if I'm wrong. So you've got all these, 900 plus, and their families, sub-postmasters all over the country. They are accused of wrongdoing, and they don't have any paperwork, as you say. So many of them said, okay, because computer says yes or computer says no, computer was God. We're now learning computers can stuff it up, but back then you couldn't. So you've got them all over the country, and you've got them in Scotland. Would each case have been dealt with in those areas? Because it often with these things, it's that you think it's only happening to you or a few.
Well, I tell you what,
because you don't know it's happening everywhere.
I'm so glad you've raised this, because one thing, and it actually comes across wonderfully in the TV drama. And if you're afraid of watching it because you think, well, it'll be sad or morose, it is sad. It is tragic. It's something that makes you angry. And at the same time, it's tremendously life-affirming, the battle that these people went through. And I'd really encourage people to watch it. It's very accurate. But one thing that really came across in that is documented, is that there appears to have been a pattern of training at the post office helpline for sub-postmasters, where people were told, you're the only one, nobody else is reporting this. But they knew of dozens almost immediately, and hundreds. And it's not just 700 and odd. I've been speaking to people in the last 24 hours close to the campaign, Justice for Subpostmasters Alliance. And I'm told that there were around 500 people who only qualify for £75,000 in compensation under this wonderful government scheme, who weren't prosecuted but had their contracts cancelled. They will have lost their homes in many cases, because many of them lived in flats above the post office, which they were on the hook for a 40-year lease for personally, because they're self-employed doing this as a kind of news agency business. You know, all of that will have been going on. And at the same time, they're being told you're the only one. Now,
so were they prosecuted if they had to go before the judge? If you were deemed to be in, I don't know, somewhere in Leicestershire or somewhere in Yorkshire, and you were found, because of this computer glitch, it showed that it said you were a thief, basically. So you lose your livelihood, your home, your reputation.
And because you're self-employed, Trisha, your contract with the post office says any shortfall has to be made up by you. But there's no paper record because of the nature of the software. So if the software is not malfunctioning, you can't prove yourself innocent.
So you're going to go before the beak in, say, Yorkshire or Leicester or Cornwall or what have you. What my thing is, do lawyers in that case, because in TV series and things like that, they talk to each other.
Do you know what, Trisha? These were lawyers in the early 2000s, at the beginning of the end of a terrible phase of cutting legal aid, dealing in a complex technical fraud. They're non-specialists. We're criminal lawyers, many of us. I do, as you know, false accounting and tech crime. That's kind of, a lot of my practice. That's unusual. Most people, they're being told there's this computer system and information about the fact that it's not working, which the post office are under a duty to disclose to the defense, appears not to have been getting through. In fact, there's an internal culture of denial at the post office through this whole period. In one case where they won a case, I think it was Joe Hamilton, and she was told that if she didn't plead guilty, Seema Misra, excuse me, and apologies to Joe Hamilton. She was prosecuted and sent to prison based on evidence from Horizon after she was convicted. And this is after all of this stuff is common knowledge in the industry, and the post office have constructive knowledge of it. the former post office head of criminal law, Jarnail Singh, and I can't libel her by saying this because this is an email in evidence and I've seen it. She wrote a celebratory email to colleagues claiming that this result would stop others from jumping, and I quote, on the horizon bashing bandwagon. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. Whether it's dishonesty or arrogance, it's people's lives, people who will never recover fully as a result of this.
No, no.